Yes.
You ready? Should we start? Yes. Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. Perfect. Welcome, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. We're so delighted that you can join us today, and also for those joining us over live stream, welcome, and we've got lots to celebrate. I'm Tracy Horn, Executive Director of the Women's Leadership Centre, on top of my day job at the Business School. And Cambridge Judge Business School is committed to gender equality and to celebrating the achievements of our many talented women at the Business School, of whom we have 3 here this evening. So thank you, ladies. We really appreciate you giving of your time this evening. And we've had a Women's Leadership Centre at the Business School since 2015. And the Women's Leadership Centre is hosting tonight's event. So we're really delighted to have the privilege to do so today. So we are delighted to welcome back 3 esteemed alumna. Dr. Vanessa Dekou, who studied for her MBA here. Maxine, Nwaneri, I hope, MBA, who also studied for an MBA. And Dr. Bola, who recently graduated from our executive MBA program. So we've got 3 exceptional women, yes we have, in their respective fields, and they're joining our Dean, Professor Mauro Guillén, today for a fireside chat on reimagining the future of work, imagining a gender-equal world. And I also wanted to just highlight that we have a little gift for you, which is a white paper that is co-authored by Dr. Bola, and it's on diversity leadership, and it's produced by the Women's Leadership Centre to mark and celebrate International Women's Day 2022. It's very much well worth a read, with recommendations for how business schools can break the bias, which we all know is the theme of this year's International Women's Day. So thank you very much, Bola, for producing that, and thank you all. So without further ado, Mauro, over to you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all for coming or for joining us via streaming. And I would like to begin by, first of all, saying, well, to all of the women in the room and beyond, happy Women's Day 2022. In case you were wondering, in the world, there are 899 designated days for something. So more than there are days on the calendar. However, Women's Day is, I think, the earliest, if not one of the earliest. So it was apparently, according to historians, first celebrated in New York City in 1909, so that's more than a century ago. So it has a long pedigree as a day during which we celebrate women's achievements, and we also take stock of of the problems or the obstacles along the way that prevent women from being on an equal footing with people like myself, with men. The UN, the United Nations, launched the International Decade for Women in 1975, so it was 1975, 1985. That was the International Decade for Women. And in this very brief introduction, I just want to also today, perhaps we should just devote a few seconds in this event to remember the women who are now in the midst of conflict and civil war, or war, just plainly, especially in Ukraine, which is the newest, but by no means the only armed conflict going on in the world. There's a number of civil wars, as you know, raging in different parts of the world. And we all know that research indicates that actually women normally suffer, immensely from these kinds of conflicts. So today we have, as Tracy already mentioned, 3 of our very, very best graduates from 2 programs, MBA and Executive MBA. So it's essentially from the MBA program, full-time or part-time. And I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to ask a few questions. But very, very quickly, I would like the audience to think about what questions you would like to ask, either here from the room or from a distance. So let me begin in alphabetical order, actually, if that's okay. So Dr. Vanessa Dekou, Managing Director of Clinical Services International, MBA from a certain year.
It's 20 years ago. I know it doesn't look, but it's 20 years.
She's a scientist and an entrepreneur with a PhD from University College London in cardiovascular genetics. I actually have trouble pronouncing it. So I can only imagine how hard it was to go through that program. And I met her for the first time in London in November. And I remember that breakfast really, really well because it really made an impression on me. I mean, to learn about your business.
I hope it was a good impression.
A very good impression about your business and about all of your accomplishments. And essentially, your company is a provider of clinical trial supplies to the biopharma industry. And I should say, and this is an interesting aspect of her career, that you started at Scotland Yard.
That's right. I started as a research associate.
So very, very interesting background here. And then you held other executive positions. As if that weren't enough, she also has a master's in market access from the University of Lyon in France, I guess, right?
That's right.
And you're from Greece, right?
Yes, that's right.
Please welcome her, okay?
Thank you.
Sitting right next to me is Dr. Bola, EMBA from a certain year, who is the founder of Orishi, and she's a visiting scholar actually here in the center, Women's Leadership Center. And you have a wealth of experience in healthcare leadership, what else should I say? I mean, what you're doing at your company is essentially helping other companies be more inclusive,
Absolutely.
right? And helping them become more diverse and more equitable, and so on and so forth, all really important things. So her PhD is in population health and epidemiology from University College London as well. So as you can see, I mean, this is just, I feel like, gosh, I should go back to school and try to catch up with all of these great scientists and also alums from our school. And then sitting in the middle, more or less in the middle of the stage is Maxine Nwaneri, MBA program, as was mentioned earlier, founder and principal consultant of The Future is Greater. This is a company that essentially helps develop leadership skills and develop talent, which is really, really important in this world. Now, not only that, she may not have a PhD, but she's a best-selling author. Okay, so you still have time to get a PhD.
I'll be back.
Don't do it. The other very important thing that I wanted to mention about you, Maxine, is that you actually worked both in financial services and in industry for more than 15 years before you became an entrepreneur and you founded your company. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
which is wonderful. And if we have anybody listening who is thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, here you have a story of how first you work, you acquire experience in a certain area, and then you take it from there. And not only that, she appears on TV frequently, she contributes to various media outlets, including Diversity Q, the Huffington Post, Success Magazine, that's a pretty good one, right? You can pick it up at the airport if you, Essence Magazine, and Thrive Global, among other media outlets. So we're going to have a conversation here first, and remember again, try to think about questions that you want to ask our panel here. So in about 20 minutes or so, we'll get into that. I mean, we want to interact with the audience as much as possible, but also the three of you, I mean, feel free to, comment on each other's comments, I mean, right? So I think the first question that I would like to pose to the panel is a pretty simple one, right? So in your experience, what has been the effect on the women that you know, the women that you work with, the women you advise, or the women that, come to your companies? What has been the impact of the pandemic on them, COVID-19? Because obviously it has impacted men and women in a very different way. So what has been your experience? And let's just start at the far end of the panel, Vanessa, and then Maxine, and then Bola.
Well, I think it's fair to say I didn't suffer per se during the pandemic, but I was a full-time housewife. I was looking after the children full-time, and I was working full-time. So, when the pandemic started, I was very worried that we might not survive, and a lot of businesses didn't survive the pandemic. Not only that, but we thrived through the pandemic. However, because we were all at home, I had to very rapidly put in place mechanisms and infrastructure to ensure that we will continue to be in business while comply with all the regulatory requirements. On top of that, I have two grotty teenagers that, they were expected to be served breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks in between, and clean the house, and take the dog out. So, it was like a non-ending circle. I was really looking forward to coming out of it. But guess what? I remained positive. I always thought that I was much luckier than many other people. So I saw it as an opportunity also to reflect, appreciate the time I had to spend with my family. That, in all honesty, I never spent so much time before with my children. I know it's pretty sad, but that's what it is. So, we spent a lot of time together, and I think we came out stronger as a family.
Yeah. And excellent. Thank you for sharing. Maxine?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you were saying, Vanessa. And, just in terms of women I advise companies, and it literally is exactly that. I think the main impact has been just burnout. Really, with the introduction of Zoom calls and everything, video calls. And, be flexible. There's this need to be always on now. So, work, the lines between work and home are just totally blurred for women. So, a lot of my clients are expected to they feel that they should be on camera looking immaculate. And meanwhile, the kids are going crazy, and there's all of this responsibility to do at work and home. And it's just a sense of being pulled in a million different directions. So prior to the pandemic, I'd coached women through work-life balance issues. The pandemic just really exponentially just made that a million times worse for so many women. And, some thrive, but many are still struggling and burning out and leaving. I think McKinsey did a report. In 2021, they have the Women in the Workplace report they do with Lean In. And I think 1 in 4 women were thinking of leaving their work totally. And that number increased to 1 in 3 women when they were mothers. And we see now in the same report, 2021, the women who were thinking of leaving, many of them have left. We've seen the Great Resignation where...
Great exodus.
Right. It's too much for a lot of people.
Yeah. So you're multitasking on steroids.
Totally, yeah.
I think if I may add here, what made my life much easier is that I'm running my own company, and I'm old enough now to say, look, that's who I am, take me or leave me. Right. So, if my dog is barking in the background, it's part of our offering. And if you don't like that, then we're not the right place for you. But I think also that's what made us a good team, a strong team together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot of women who are not in that position where they're not running the company and they feel judged if they have care and responsibilities. They don't want their team to think they're slacking because they don't have childcare, but the whole world is literally in some way, shape or form in the same boat. So this is what I've been seeing over the last 18, 24 months.
Yeah, so my point is similar to the points that both ladies have made. It's like multitasking on steroids. I was in the middle of, alongside a full-time job, I was in the middle of my executive MBA during the pandemic. So it's like constantly on screen. And you actually get headaches from being within a learning environment. You're not just passively listening, you're interacting, you're asking questions. But one of the things that I thought came out brilliantly was the flexibility and adaptability. Like we all just jumped on this wagon. We didn't have a choice. It was a level playing field. Everybody worked from home. So we all kind of came to the same level where we're all struggling together, but we're all evolving. I mean, I think in 2020 we were still using WebEx and Skype, and suddenly everybody is into Zoom, and wherever in the world everybody knows what Zoom is. And sorry if there's any WebEx shareholder. I'm not slagging you guys off, but now there's just so many technologies we all had to get used to so quickly. And even in lockdown 1, between lockdown 1 and 2, there were so many things that we had to catch up with. You go to the restaurants, you had to scan. It's just like we all had to step up to the next level and catch up with technology. psychology. And I think if we didn't have the pandemic, most of us, or many people, wouldn't have, advanced that quickly. So there was the bad side, but there was also a lot of good side, and the legacy stays on. And I struggle with us saying post-pandemic, the medical hat in me, we're kind of not over yet, so we shouldn't throw that away.
Yeah. Now we're focusing today on work, right? But before we move on to the next question, I actually would like to ask a follow-up, which is, how about girls? Meaning younger folk, okay? These people who live in our house, we take to school every day, and but in particular girls. I mean, you have Vanessa and Maxine. You have a girl, right, and a boy, but you've seen other girls, and they've also suffered during this pandemic, right? I mean, children, let's say below the age of 12, so pre-teenage children, right? In what ways do you think this has affected girls in particular, this pandemic?
So I have a 13-year-old daughter, and it's pretty sad when we sit together to watch TV. She has seen everything on Netflix, and, the sort of like from shades of gray to anything, because it was just there, available, So you are working and you hope that they are doing the homework, which they were doing because she was lucky that she's going to a very well-organized school. But, it kind of did affect her mental health. To a certain extent, I don't think to a very big extent, but I tried to have their days very full. So she was doing sport, and then I insisted at lunchtime we would go out and walk the dog, do something together. Please help me to cook. The house was in a complete chaos, but we tried to make it a happy environment rather than everything was more relaxed. It didn't matter, you can do basically whatever you want if that makes you happy.
Yeah. Well, my daughter is 6, so a lot younger.
Yes.
And, I have to say, just being home and having to homeschool and run a business, I have a deep appreciation for teachers that do the job of teaching our kids. It is not easy. So there was an adjustment that had to take place with a mum who is not that patient of a teacher, learning how to teach and actually ensuring that the education went on. But I think we kind of got through the initial rocky patch when we found our rhythm. And I found through the whole experience, I did my best in terms of protecting her from a lot of the negative news. We created a sort of bubble for our kids. I have a 6-year-old daughter, 2-year-old son. So my husband and I kind of worked hard to keep them in this bubble away from a lot of the negativity. But I think there was an initial adjustment that we worked on. And I think we actually benefited from, you mentioned about spending time with the family, building deeper bonds, building new rituals, having all sorts of responsibilities. So we have a family meeting just to make things work. Like, how are we going to cope through this week with 4 different schedules? My daughter at 6 runs that, and she loves running it. So I found that, we thrived. Through the chaos, we thrived.
Yeah. So Bola, you've studied health.
Absolutely.
And well-being, right? So how what is your view? You have a PhD in that, and you've done research on it. So how have children fared during this pandemic, in your view?
That was where my mind went when you asked that question. So I was looking more at actually not necessarily just the health and well-being, but the global health perspective on that. So it's all well and good if you can afford a nice computer and you have constant internet and it's all hunky-dory. There's so many girls around the globe. The internet, forget it. A personal computer to work from home or study from home. So they really taking a big hit in terms of their education. It's just no school for 2 years or more. So there's a significant global health impact in terms of health and well-being, but also in terms of education and the time it will take them to catch up. But even in the UK, we've seen the data in terms of the impact on GCSEs and exams, and we've had to make certain adjustments for people taking young students taking exams these days. So yeah, there's been a very, very negative impact when it comes to education for young women.
Yeah, and in the developing world, there is a gender digital gap.
Absolutely.
Right? So not so much in Europe or North America, but elsewhere there's fewer women than men, there's fewer girls than boys who actually use the internet and have access to the technologies and so on and so forth. So they've been more severely affected by it.
And it's not just the students, the teachers themselves, keeping themselves up to speed. The whole infrastructure was just affected.
Yeah. So let's think for a moment about the future. I think it is probably a fact that we're going to have hybrid work for a long time to come, right? not only because there's still issues here and there with the pandemic, but also because, hey, we seem to be enjoying the fact that we can work both from home and from the office, right? So what advice would you give to women now? Because again, knowing that women do take on a disproportionate share of the responsibilities in the household, and that's our fault, men's fault, obviously. But what do you recommend women moving forward, right? So they're going to be hybrid working for a while, but at the same time, you know, they want to spend time with their kids, they want to, you know, take them to school in the morning. So what would be your advice, or how do you envision this future ahead of us in terms of hybrid work and how that's going to change women and their experience? Women with or without children, doesn't matter.
Of course.
Yeah.
Look, I think in life you have to make choices, and also you have to come to realize that you can't do everything. So I think it's unfair for a child to have a mother who works full-time and thinks at the same time can look after a child full-time. And also it's unfair for the business that she works for to be a full-time carer and a full-time employee. So in my opinion, there should be some barriers there. I also think it's quite well documented that people who work from home don't get promoted as much as people who go to the office. If you work from home, you don't benefit from the tacit knowledge, you don't benefit from socializing with your colleagues. You know, there are a lot of things. I know a lot of people who work from home and they don't get out of their pajamas for a week. That's not very healthy because
Half of the pajamas.
Yeah, that's right.
They dress
Yes.
from waist up.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Half of the pajamas, but you see, that's not very healthy. So if you ask me, I think the working environment is not only about productivity, but also it's about helping you to progress as a human being, to acquire knowledge, to become a better professional, to feel good about yourself, and to socialize. So from this point of view, I would strongly encourage anyone to at least consider going to the office. From the business point of view, I wouldn't like people to just work from home because, you know, one thing is to talk to your colleague around the room and sort out things, issues, challenges. If I develop a strong relationship with you, you are more willing to help me if there is a challenge, rather than sending an email, can you please help me? No, I can't because, you know, it's not in my standard operating procedures what you're asking. So I think people should think very carefully, choosing, let's say, not to go to the office or taking for granted that they can do everything, because in my experience, they can't.
Yeah, how many employees do you have at your company?
Well, now we are 15, and I'm very proud. My colleague Sirin, who is the PhD in nanotechnology, is here with us.
Okay.
So, you know, sometimes I say that the office is like a playground. So, you know, people come, go, the dog, my children sometimes come, it's full of cakes. It's not your typical office, but it's a kind of happy office, I think. Right?
That was a leading question.
I never worked anywhere that you have a dog around.
So.
Maxine.
I would say, you know, hybrid working is here to stay for a while. And to women, just in general, I think with this whole thing, it's easy to fall back into kind of reaction mode. There's been much that has happened to us that's been so out of our control, and this is us as in everybody. And it's so easy to be in reaction mode to things that are grossly out of your control. And I think for women to be able to thrive, moving forward into the future, you've got to get out of reaction mode into creation mode. You know, what is it you want? What does success look like for you? Because you made the point, you know, if you want to, you know, grow in your career, be promoted, maybe being away from that kind of the water cooler discussions, it's not a thing. But for some women, that's not your idea of success, being promoted. Your idea of success is maybe, you know, maintaining some level at work that you're happy and having, you know, the 50% at home. So what is success for you? And getting really, really crystal clear about that and getting very intentional about creating that. I think that is where we succeed, because it's just so easy to kind of wake up in the morning and you watch the news and you're depressed, and then you switch on the email, there's 15 different things and you're on 15 different people's agendas before you've checked in with yourself and what you actually want and started creating that. So I think if for us as women to thrive moving forward, we've got to create what's within us, our version of success.
Agreed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both ladies have said. And also in terms of looking forward, I know we think hybrid and flexi working is all happening and everyone is involved. Actually, many people can't work from home still, even with COVID. There are many industries. So for instance, hospitality, those in healthcare, those who clean, they can't work from home, so they don't have those options. And I love the point that you've made, and there's a brilliant write-up on the Women's Leadership Center. I think I strongly recommend it on the future of work. So I think it just came out last week or so. And it's going through many of the points that we've just raised today in terms of we all want to embrace hybrid working and flexibility, but sometimes hybrid working isn't necessarily that flexible. I think we think both go hand in hand. But in some cases, I'd rather know if I can do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so I can plan childcare than for my employer to say, actually, can you come in on this day and not that day? So it's not just women, it's not just what we want to do. The employers also matter, the workforce, the tools that we have also matters. And some of the points that you've made in terms of, we see the positives, but the water cooler conversations, and when you're constantly, I mean, women are more likely to choose to work from home. We have the data on that, and they're missing out on these interactions. And that article is completely brilliant because it was talking about we tend to perceive people we see as working harder. So the person at home might be working 9 to 5 non-stop, but because this person is in the office, we see them all the time. We think they're working much harder. They're getting more recognition and more promotion. So we just have to think about the effect on the people that are working from home that we can't see. And all the amazing people on Zoom as well that we can't see today, they're also there, they're present, and they're interacting. So in the future, we have to consider all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have another 7 minutes or 8 minutes to go, okay? So remember to, with my questions. The audience, you're not off the hook yet. Not that early. But audience, start thinking about what questions you want to ask. Let me reverse the order now. So, Bola, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll make our way across the panel, across the stage here. So as you know, research indicates that there's a so-called motherhood penalty. So women, when they have children, they somehow end up losing ground in terms of promotions and pay at companies around the world. This happens everywhere in the world. And by the way, the same research also indicates that there's a fatherhood premium. So for some reason, when you compare men with kids and men without kids, the ones with kids actually tend to do better. So this is astounding. Right? It's just everything seems to be upside down in the world. So Bola, you and your company, you interact a lot with leaders and you help companies think about talent and all of that. So I'm not going to ask you what is the formula to reverse this, or what is the magic bullet that may help us overcome this, but what do you think are some reasonable things that organizations can do to address the gender gap and to once and for all abolish not just the motherhood penalty or the fatherhood bonus or premium, but just in general lack of gender parity in an organizational context?
Absolutely, and I think that's a brilliant question, both from an organization perspective and even government and legislation, because some of these things you can say it as much as you want. If it's not enforced in law to a degree, then organizations just opt out. So maternity and paternity leave is one of the ways, and I know there are many companies that do it where if you don't take it, you will lose out. So the paternity leave, the men that don't take their paternity leave, they completely lose out. So why would you want to lose out on that amount of money? That's one way to enforce that. And also, there are many organizations that have a brilliant support system for women who have just had children and helping them with childcare and flexible working as well. But in terms of policies, it's just, I will always talk about the Scandinavian countries. They just have so many brilliant policies that support mothers away from maternity leave throughout the childbearing years. And something else throughout raising the children. And as we know, childcare is so expensive. That in itself makes many women think, I'd rather stay at home and take care of my child than put them in care and pay so much money. It's so expensive. So there's so many policies, and this is nothing new. And sometimes you wonder why organizations are not taking the best advantage of this. But it starts with both at a governmental level and with policies within the organization as well. There's so many things that we can do to support women and reduce the gap.
Yeah, let me ask you a follow-up, and forgive me for being provocative. But, so do you? There has been this big debate since the 1990s about the mommy track. Should organizations, especially large ones, have a different track for not just women, perhaps also men who want to have children and those who don't?
I would say yes. And again, I mean, without impacting personal choice, I would say yes. You have to put your money where your mouth is. If you want to see progress in those areas, you have to just implement policies to support. And in many cases, when we look at diversity and some of these things, it's very, very easy to talk, but if you don't have policies that actually help you to make a change, you're just saying things. There's a brilliant app that's come out today. Sorry, not app. There's a Twitter account that I saw today. I think it's the Pay Gap app. So it says, for every company that tweets Happy International Women's Day, I'm going to publish your gender pay gap. And it keeps doing that continuously. And so many of these companies are now deleting their hooray, Happy International Women's Day, because the stats don't match up with what they claim they're saying. So
Yeah. Maxine?
I think it's so fascinating, a lot of what you're saying, agree with it, certainly. I think another thing that more that companies could do is really invest more in the individuals and getting into their minds as to what they want, because you can have this mummy trap, but not every mother wants the same thing. And assuming that they do makes no sense. So perhaps invest in, coaching or whatever it is to ensure that those parents, get clear on what they want and, either work with the policies that exist within the organization to get what they want or challenge those and have new policies created. Because oftentimes when I, coach parents, most of the issues are not necessarily with what needs to be done in the organization, although much needs to be done. It's oftentimes with the individual themselves, limiting thinking, well, once you become a mum, this and that's not available. Have you checked? No. So there's work to be done on both sides in terms of organizations could do more, and we can also do more. So I think it's kind of working hand in hand to really see what is right and ensure that what is right also, gets the business results that we want, because we don't want to do this just, oh yeah, it's nice to do, it's good for business. So let's collaborate to do what's good for all.
And I absolutely take that point that you've mentioned on personal improvement and taking some responsibility for yourself as well. So it's really good.
I think also it's a matter of personal choice. So, for example, between the age of, let's say, 30 to 50, you are really working hard to build your career, yes? But that's also the age that most people raise children. Mm-hmm. So these two things go hand in hand. In my case, working for me was non-negotiable. So, I had this discussion with my partner, and I said we have to put an infrastructure in place that would allow me to work. And you know what? I've done too many calls from the playground, cooking on mute, and somehow it worked. And, before you know, the children grow, and I used to spend more than half of my salary on childcare, but I thought, one day we'll be fine. Also, for me personally, my belief is that I'm giving a really good example to my daughter, okay? I'm teaching her life skill. I'm saying, look, I don't work only because I love what I'm doing, but also work to support my family. And also, one thing is the policy, so on and so forth. The other thing is the everyday reality. And for most households, they can't just survive on one income. So you have to put all these things into consideration and decide what is important for you. Mm. Now, as for companies, I think companies would be very narrow-minded to exclude this enormous pool of talent because of sort of like maternity challenges. Having said that, also the employee should build trust with the employer that, you are helping me out, that's what I'm doing for you. Because again, too many times you see people that they take very extended leave and then they go. So, all these things I think need to be addressed on a fair basis.
But also to that point, sometimes it feels like you can't win. You have children, you have to take care of them. You don't have children, you still have problems within the workplace. So I think companies really need to do as much as they can to support women throughout their career track.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a warning to the audience. This is my last question. Okay, so get your act together and come up with some questions.
Can I just say something to the last point? So companies need to work women, but also I think women need to command their own rights, okay? So, I mean, you know, it's a fair play. If you think you are unfairly paid or unfairly treated, you have to move on. You can't change big organizations. This is well documented. But if you believe that you have a valuable set skill, you have to find the place where appreciates this.
That's very true.
Agreed.
Being exposed and having the training to know that I deserve better and I can live if I want to. Sometimes you're just stuck in that rut and you don't even think that actually there's a big world out there. This company is not doing the best for me.
Yeah, within the company, I love what you said about your partner as well, because I think a lot of this gets decided at home around the table. You know, there's so much that the company can do, but if it all falls, if you don't have the infrastructure at home, what the company is doing does not help you. So I think true partnership at home, if you have a partner, it's going to make or break it, quite frankly.
And being inclusive, if you don't have a partner, that's completely fine.
Yeah, true.
My partner's here, hello, but if you don't have one, you go girl.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So my last quick question, I want to take advantage of the situation and get some advice.
All righty.
Okay, so Maxine, you're going to go first. So the question is, for somebody, whether it's a man or a woman, right, who is like myself now, the head of an organization where there's several hundred people working, what is the one thing that you think that person needs to do so that that organization can make progress in terms of gender parity?
Listen. Listen. Don't assume you know. One thing I always do when I go into work with companies on this is they're like, come and run this workshop for our diversity group. And I'm like, yeah, great. I have your brief. Now let me listen to the people you want me to talk to. And almost 100% of the time, we have the brief that we've co-created with the leader that's brought me in, and we've listened to the people, and we change the brief every single time. Because there's the things you know that you don't know, and there's just so much more. So I think listen, often and always.
I will do that. Vanessa?
Well, I mean, most places where I was working, I don't think they were very sympathetic to women. And this goes back maybe 30 years ago, but that's it. And I have a lot of examples to show. I think when you're in this environment, it's very difficult for you to realize that actually there's nothing wrong with me. I'm one of the hundreds of millions out there who works as a child, so on and so forth. So you have to recognize what is right for you. As for companies, apart from policy, it has to come from the leadership. I mean, it's well documented. In the Fortune 500 companies, you have only 8% women. So you either have to find very progressive men who realize that the pool talent should not shrink, and bring all these people around the table. Otherwise, it's just sort of like academic discussion.
Yeah, Bola?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what they both said, and I tend to say that a lot. But great minds think alike. So I've always loved that quote: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So if you don't really take care of people, if you don't understand their lived experiences, if you don't listen, if you're not inclusive, and you have all these strategies, it's just not going to work, because at the end of the day, the people make the business, and you build your culture and your relationship with the people matters a lot more than your business processes and strategies on your big, happy International Women's Day tag without really supporting gender pay gap, gender diversity, listening to the issues that your employees have. So it's about the people.
Okay. All right. Now you've told them, so now I have to... deliver on that. So let's go into questions from the audience. So who would like to ask a question? And then Tracy, you can pass the mic, right?
Yeah. I'm sprinting over to you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you all the way back.
You didn't see me all the way back here? So, hi, thank you for being here tonight. I have a question, and Mara, I'm going to steal your word, provocative. I think there is a culture that exists within women that we don't talk about a lot in the workplace, where there's women who, as you've been talking about, have children, you know, that flexibility, those things, childcare, all those things are really important. And then there's another section of women that either by choice or by circumstance don't have children. And I think as you progress through the workplace, you see those different tensions happen in the workplace. And as leaders or as organizations, how do you make sure all women have a place and feel supported, even depending on their life choices, I guess? Because it is a really different thing, and it's something I've seen happen throughout my career.
I mean, for example, if I can speak about our company, I can guarantee you 100% there is absolutely no pay gap at CSI. You know, I mean, if anything, it's the opposite. And I think we treat people as individuals. I mean, it's irrelevant to me who your partner is, if you have a partner, if you have children, if you have pets. You as a human being have some commitments. So I think the organization should allow you to exercise your right to look after yourself, your mental health, and your commitments. Your commitment might be your elderly parents. We're not going to penalize you for that. We should allow and give you the space to grow and flourish as a human being, I think.
I would agree, and I would kind of go back to the comment I made about listening. And we can't assume even two mothers have the same needs. You know, there's some moms that actually want to accelerate their career when they have kids and don't necessarily want the flexibility. So making that assumption that, you know, every woman wants that, no. So I think as organizations, listen to hear what the real needs are, and as the individual, voice them. If that's something that you struggle with, get support. Community, coaches, whatever, to articulate the value you bring and what you want. And because a lot of time, you know, people don't ask. But when you ask, the worst you're going to get is no, and oftentimes you won't get no. No never killed anyone, last time I checked. And a lot of time people never hear no. They get what they want. So just being able to get clear within yourself of what is success to me at this stage in my life, articulate that clearly with the value you bring, you'll get it.
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant question. And I think I alluded to this when I was saying, well, you can't win. If you don't have children, it's your fault. If you have children, it's your fault. And also when we're talking about partners, and I'm like, if you don't have a partner, you go. And we have a way of putting labels on people, and because you're X, therefore you need this more, or you're the true person that's suffering, or that. And actually, a brilliant point that you made as well in terms of this perception in the workplace that maybe you have extra time because you don't have kids. You have no idea what I'm going through. You don't have any idea what my work life is, my home life, my family life, my mental health. And we just published a brilliant paper on this. Actually, I'll share this with you, where in the field of reproductive health, because the focus is on reproductive health, we've got this amazing group of women who actually say, you know what, it's my personal choice, I don't want kids, I've never wanted kids, I've never had a maternal instinct, but I contribute, I'm a valuable member of the society, and my needs are just as important, and my voice is just as valid. So thank you for raising that.
Can I also say something else? I think there's no right and wrong, but for example, from my point of view, I think I would be disadvantaging people who don't have to look after kids, if people with kids were, let's say, to come at the office at 10, whereas everybody else had to come at 8:30. So as a business also, you have to be fair, and also people somehow have to make arrangements for their own requirements, you know.
Hi, sorry. My question's for you about the listening. I thought that was really interesting. And what I'm curious about is you said that when you come to a company and they have a brief that they think they know what the problems are, and then the problems are different. I'm wondering if you see a pattern in what they think the problems are and what the problems really are. Is there like a clear distinction about what the sort of top-down perception is versus the bottom-up?
Yeah, so the biggest one, I'll kind of just reference, I won't name the client. I'll reference a recent engagement. The brief I was brought in was, oh, we're thinking about returning back to work. What is the ideal like hybrid policy? Like, you know, how's everyone feeling? How are we going to do this in terms of a company. We're going back to work. Help everybody be happy about going back to work. So I said, okay, great. Let's have an inspirational workshop about going back to work. When we did the listening exercise, which was just a simple survey anonymously, what came up was deep anxiety about, being around, you referenced, the pandemic, post-pandemic, there's a deep anxiety. It's not post-pandemic. Somebody down the road just died from me. There's somebody who was suicidal. There was somebody who is like, oh my goodness, how am I going to be now commuting 2 hours a day when I'm now able to have dinner with my family every night? And there was this whole thing about let's inspire everybody and have this big bang return to the office. And what we uncovered was deep, mental issues that people had to work through and get supported through. So it could be things like that. It could be, again, let's help all the mothers, get additional flexibility. And actually, some of the mothers are looking to see how they can get their next promotion. And it's just kind of a disconnect if there's not real listening, and kind of putting everybody in the same boat. Does that answer? You're welcome.
Hi, I've been struggling for years to be assertive, and I realized there is a gender gap in being assertive. Some men can be assertive, and women sometimes are assertive, but they are perceived in a different way.
Aggressive.
Usually negative. So I would like to hear your best tips for women being assertive and being heard, not judged.
Yeah. I would say just be clear on what you want and ask for it. We all know how to get what we want in different areas of life. We don't have to be aggressive. Like, if you want dinner, hey, would you like to get dinner? Just be really clear on what you want and ask for it in your lovely, normal way. Does that help?
I think in the workplace you have to be firm. So quite often, and I've sort of struggled with that over the years, but clearly recently I had to be very clear. So quite often, in my opinion, you might not be assertive because you are not very clear what you're after. So if you know what you are after, you can go to either your colleagues or to your line manager and say, look, that's what I aspire to do or to be, and also give a reason. You can't say, oh, I want to be the managing director. I mean, why do you want to be the managing director? You know what I mean, okay? And then, as for aggressive, I've often been perceived as aggressive. Well, that's fine, because, I always had to fight my corner in the workplace. I mean, I'm Greek, I came here when I was 18, I put myself through university, sort of like the PhD, business school. I still remember when I came here for my interview. I mean, the dean at that time must have thought I was completely mad or on drugs, but guess what? He made me an offer, so here I am.
And I'd just add one more thing, just be clear on what you want, but also I would say, speak to people how they want to be spoken to. So typically, who are you asking? Are they somebody who wants you to get straight to the point? I would practice asking for what I want straight to the point. Are you speaking to someone like my husband who likes a lot of detail? So if you're speaking to that kind of person, get a lot of detail and go around the houses before you ask what you want. So I think the key thing is get clear on what you want, and then say, okay, who am I going to ask? And how do they normally like to be communicated to? And you can usually tell by how the person communicates to you. People who are very direct and want you to get to the point communicate very direct and to the point. So if you come to that person going around the houses, it's just so annoying. So I'd say get clear on what you want, who am I speaking to, and how do they like to be spoken to? And practice. You can, if you're in a community, if you have a coach, a mentor, practice your pitch in the way the person likes to be spoken to. So it's not about you being aggressive or assertive even. It's about treating people how they want to be treated.
I completely agree with that point on practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the more effective you see it is, the more confident you are in doing it. And I discuss this a lot with the students that I mentor in my academic life. It's very similar to presentations. Like the first time you do it, you're just like, that was terrible. But the more you do it, and you still get nervous, but at least you got your words out there. And something else that I know that works is we can all be assertive when we need to. It's the context that makes it difficult. So within the home environment, whether with your mom or with your daughter or with your father, you know how to say, or with a friend, you can say, stop that. It's just in a different environment, you feel kind of awkward. So again, you have it in you, it's just being able to do it in a different context. Or the flip side, I find it when people say, oh, I don't have time for this, or I can't reply to that email. Actually, if that person is important to you,
Yeah.
if the Prime Minister sent you an email, you will find a time to, well, maybe not the Prime Minister, but you will find a time to respond to that person. So usually with handwritten emails, there's a mental block somewhere that say, I feel like I can't be assertive in this context, and check your assumptions, your biases about who you are, and then the more you do it, the greater you are. And it's okay to be on the learning curve.
Hi, good evening. Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Thank you so much for all your lovely discussion and insights. One point of yours that really struck a chord was, all this time we are absorbing so much information from all directions, but have we really checked with ourselves? Have we checked in, as it were? So what would you suggest organizations could do in the long term to make sure that as an individual, people do take care of themselves and sort of have checked in? And also on the individual level, there's a lot of buzzwords going on at the moment. There's meditation, yoga, and so on and so forth. Is there any one preferred one that you've suggested to people you'd say that really helps in individuals as themselves checking in?
So you're asking anyone in particular?
Question sort of addressed to you based on the comment you made, but open for everyone, actually.
Okay, well, I have some thoughts. So on the organizational level, there's a lot of well-being and health. So many companies are doing a lot of great things. What I've seen really effective with organizations is where managers, take a real leading role in this supporting their employees by, first of all, kind of modeling this kind of more healthy way of living. So they're not always on, they're not kind of go, 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 go. They model that it's okay to have a life outside of work, number one. And secondly, I love what you were saying, earlier on about, it has to be fair. You have to kind of contribute to the company. So managers also don't necessarily look at, okay, you're working this amount of hours a day, so now you're productive, but say, no, you've delivered this output, so you're productive. So if you manage to find a way to do 8 hours work in 2, good for you. So it's done on, output rather than time. And I would say as well, for the individual, you asked about the individual. Personally, I love meditation. So I'm not a morning person, but I've made myself a morning person through the pandemic, where I'm up before 5 most mornings. The house is quiet. I just have peaceful music. There's no emails. There's no news. The world is peaceful for a moment. And I check in. I pray. I'm a woman of faith. I pray, and I get what are my to-dos for the day from that space before all the input. So that's powerful for me, because then when all the input starts, there's all these 1,000,001 things, I know from my morning meditation that these are the 3 must-do things. And I do those 3 must-do things. And I feel there's still 1,000 things on my to-do list, but I've done well today.
And what time do you go to bed then?
Good question. So when my son sleeps, I go to bed, usually by 9:30. And when he doesn't sleep, whenever he sleeps.
That's a long day.
Yeah, but it's even when I'm exhausted, even when I've gone to bed literally at midnight, I need that time, because when I get up and I'm straight into the chaos of the day, I feel the difference. I'm all over the place. I'm not as effective. I'm reacting, not creating the life I said I wanted. So it's powerful just to have that moment without any of the external input to hear from me.
Do we have a question from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions from the live stream.
Okay.
And one, it's from Stephanie, who's an MBA from a few years ago and who's a member of the Student Women's Leadership SIG. So thank you for sending this in, Steffi. And she's asking, what's your experience of shaping your working times and rhythm as an employee versus as an entrepreneur/company owner? I sometimes do wonder if working a lot equals creating big results is still true. What's your view?
Well, can I take this? I think there is a 100% direct, not indirect, direct relationship between input and output. There are no two ways about it. The interesting thing is that even when I was working for someone, I was working as if it was my own company, okay? So I think you can't really succeed, no matter what success means for you, if you can't put the effort, the hours. Now, I work 365 days a year. I mean, there's no such thing as Christmas, New Year. I just work, but I'm very lucky that I love what I'm doing. So it doesn't feel like a hurdle. it's part of who I am. And, you know, somebody might say this is wrong and, you know, you don't switch off, which is absolutely true. But I don't think also it can happen differently.
I definitely agree with Vanessa's point. When I was working for someone else, I put in my 100%. Working for myself, I think one of the most important things to me right now is the autonomy, but I work a lot. But linking to the point that the question that was asked previously, I also, more than ever before, have created personal time for me. During the COVID was the first time I ever ran, and honestly, if you had seen me, it's a comical thing to see me running. But I made it. I ran the Cambridge Half Marathon last year. I ran the Cambridge Half Marathon 2 days ago.
Wow.
And that's just a habit. Thank you. That was something that I felt that I needed to do to change my life and the trajectory that I wanted to take. And it's a very, very good book on this, Atomic Habits, in terms of just creating a completely, I see this is not working, this is where I want to get to, and how to build little steps to get there. It's a brilliant book. I strongly recommend it. So.
Thank you. And then we have another question from, this time from Jack, again via YouTube. And his observation is, women have been disproportionately affected by the negative effects of COVID-19. Can you speak to the intersectional factors, e.g. race, age, socioeconomic status, that have exacerbated these impacts?
I'll take that one. Yes, and I realize we have a gender focus today because it's International Women's Day. There's a brilliant report by the World Economic Forum in terms of the setback that we've made due to the pandemic on women's progression. I think we've moved from, the gap we had was 99.5 years, and just because of COVID, we've gone as far back as 135 years. That is just gender. And then when you start to add race and disability and sexual orientation and discrimination and all of that is just, I don't even know if there's a way to calculate all those matrices. So yes, there's a significant impact when you start to consider different dimensions. There are so many recommendations on an individual level, organizational level, and governmental level in terms of policies that you can help to change this. But I think, and this is where I usually go back to even with my research, the first step is awareness. Whether on an individual level or on a societal level, do we even realize that these things are happening? So with COVID and all the impact that it had on all of our health and what it had on some certain demographics, at least we're talking about it. And then when it comes to gender, I mean, we went through the Me Too phase. At the very least, people know about these things, whether it's sinking in a separate matter. And then we had the Black Lives Matter conversation. At the very least, people know about these things. So I think we're making some progress at the base level in terms of awareness. But when you start to compound the impact and the intersectionality, there's just so much work to be done. And to directly answer that, it's not just on an individual level or corporate level. There are things that you can do, but we're talking about wider societal changes here.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Also, it's very interesting. It has been well documented how COVID exacerbated the social class differences, effects. So, you know, one thing is living in a very big house. You don't have to worry about income. Children have their own laptop, the big screen, their own office. You have a garden, and you see this as a sort of like good time together. And another thing is that if you have a whole family cramped in a small place, you know, they are not well educated, maybe they can't afford health care. It's just very difficult. And, you know, above all, you have to worry how to pay your bills, how to make sense. And I think a lot of people were in this situation. So it's tragic that, you know, not everybody has equal access to sort of good health care, and in front of a disease we are not equal, but I think unfortunately that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with, you know, what you've said, but I also want to kind of put it a different angle. I have a client who came to me at the height of COVID hitting, and then there was Black Lives Matter, and she came to me because she just felt totally helpless. She's like, you know, my kids are going to school, like there's racist comments being made to them. She was furious, she was helpless, nobody around her could help. And I said, okay, so what are you going to do with this? And she kind of looks at me puzzled because she's like, well, what can I do? Like, there's so much against me. And I'm like, okay, well, you can either let this make you or break you. What are you going to do with this? To make a very long story short, that same woman, Nwaneri, is basically, because she was the parent governor at her school, she's been campaigning, she's set up a business running anti-racism training in local schools, and she's actually recently been elected as the local representative for her borough for the May elections coming up. This was a woman who was helpless, a black woman with kids and afraid. So I say to anyone listening and everybody, anyone, you can look at all of these issues coming against you. What are you going to do with it? Because people's bias can either break you, which is the intention, or maybe it's even unconscious, or you can let it make you. She had no idea who she could be. And because of this, she is living just beyond everybody's mind's life. Let it make you, not break you.
So we're approaching the top of the hour, and I think, finally we've all been enriched by this exchange here on, once again, International Women's Day. Before we give a strong round of applause to our 3 alumni here, I'd like you to join me in thanking Tracy Horn and her team. Working hard for organizing this event. Thank you so much for doing so. This is great. And just to, about the panelists, you're always welcome here. This is your home. Come back as frequently as you possibly can. But thank you so much for sharing with us your experiences and your wisdom and your, I think, good common sense, right, about all of these issues. So please join me in thanking them. And now, I think there are refreshments waiting for us outside.
So now we can carry on the conversation for those of us who are physically in the building, in the foyer in the Addenbrooks building. And for those of you who've joined us over the live stream, thanks so much for joining us this evening. We're really sorry that you can't join us for the drinks reception, but hopefully next time you'll come and join us in person. So thanks, everyone, and we'll now go through. Thank you. Thank you.